Welcome back, everybody. Longhorn fans everywhere. Here on this Monday night, frozen Monday night, I will add, high atop Houston, Texas, Monday, January 15th, around 10:30 p.m. We are back for the 43rd edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, your source for everything Texas football, Texas basketball, Texas baseball, but also college sports in general. I'm here. My name is Michael Wein. I have, as always, with me, uh, frequently here on Dit Hole, my excellent co-host and fellow Longhorn fan, Emmy Nixon. How are you tonight?
I'm good, man. Any night where the Eagles lose is a fantastic night for me as a Cowboys fan. But tonight was even better because it was a playoff loss on a night where they had been talking so much trash on the internet and just everywhere about my Cowboys, as they should. Obviously, they're rivals, of course. But them losing tonight just made it sting a little less for me. So that's always good news.
Yeah, we're officially on to the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, and we will get into that tomorrow night, I believe. So make sure you tune into that. We've got a loaded show tonight. We've got a bunch of topics to get into. Number one, and we're like this isn't even going to cover the entire scope of Texas news over the past week, but first we're going to get into this health of college football discussion, and it's probably going to become like a series. So today we're going to address the calendar, and then maybe in the next episode we'll address a different aspect. In the next episode, a different aspect. But today we're focusing in on the college football calendar here to kick off the offseason as I believe this is our second or third official episode of the college football offseason since Michigan won the national championship game. Then we're going to get into Sark's extension. He was extended for 4 years over the weekend. We kind of knew it was coming, but I think the process was expedited a little bit by the fact that Nick Saban retired and the Alabama job opened up. Texas brass wanted to make sure that they secured their guy. They did that. We'll get into Sark and his future at Texas. We're also going to talk about a big commitment Texas picked up in the portal over the weekend, possibly the biggest so far of this cycle. And then at the end, we're going to take another program like we did last episode with Ohio State, and we're going to talk about their portal additions. But before we get into all that, make sure you like and subscribe. And if you're tuned in live, which we thank you very much, leave your comments, questions, whatever you want, opinions in the chat. Okay. We're going to start with this college football calendar discussion. It's a prominent discussion pretty much everywhere amongst those who care about the sport of college football, whether you are really bought in a diehard college football fan like myself, or you're just more of a college football fan, but you're not kind of as bought in. You might have other interests as well that might be bigger than college football. But anyhow, this has been a big topic over the past couple of months, past couple of weeks in particular. So let's start with this. Your thoughts on the calendar overall and what needs to happen? Like, how can college football resurrect this issue?
Yeah, I think let's just start with each how we feel about it, just so you can get your thoughts in on how you feel about the current calendar as well. But for me, the um, for me watching college football, I've had a on and off relationship with college football like throughout my life, but this year is where I really started watching it more religiously because I've had more time on Saturdays, and I do like love the sport and I want what's best of the sport still, but I'm definitely not an expert by any means. So I went about attacking this discussion with I look towards people who are, big, you know, names in the sport, huge voices in the sport, and heard what they think, and I've tried to kind of take the nuggets that I've liked out of what they've said. And the biggest thing that I've heard every single time, and it's one that I agree with the most, is the, the structure of where transfer portal takes place and where early signing day takes place. All of that stuff in the month of December, it needs to be distributed differently. Like the overlap there, it's too much to ask of coaches to have to deal with all of that at once. So the thing that I've heard is moving early signing day to July and making it so that colleges have to, not send out, scholarships to every single recruit they see all over the country. Like they have to give them a full commitment from the college, and have it written in stone before the season, so that the the players that want that insurance, so to speak, can have that and sign it before the season. And it'll also take away some headaches for coaches, so that you won't have this, early signing day stuff in the middle of November with all of that chaos that goes on with it. But I'll transfer it back to you. Like, what is your take on the current calendar? And did you go like a similar direction as me in terms of how you came about your opinions on this stuff?
Well, I've listened to a lot of the voices that I respect in the sport, including some coaches.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
definitely more of an expert than me
Chip
on.
Kelly has voiced his opinions on not only the calendar, but other issues in college football. There have been other prominent voices, particularly coaches for that matter, that have started to voice their opinions as well. And I think that's good for the sport, given college football, for whatever reason, for the longest time, um, has no central leadership. And it doesn't make any sense. And that, I think, leads to a lot of the things in college football that exist but don't make any sense. And the calendar is where we start. The college football calendar makes little to no sense, and it really hasn't for the entirety of the transfer portal NIL era. And they've really done nothing to adjust it and or fix it, because there's nobody, there's no central voice. Conferences really control the sport right now. Two conferences control the sport. It's the SEC and the Big Ten. And that's probably how it's going to be moving forward with the expansion and realignment stuff that's about to happen officially. Um, it's like college football is kind of like right now in 2024, like halfway organized, semi organized, super chaos. It's just
Yeah,
this piece moving here, this piece moving here, this piece moving here, this coach going there, this player's going there, this player's getting that NIL deal, this player, got a Lamborghini in Austin. Like it's just like there's
yeah.
no,
Like even if
no
there were like a Adam Schefter, Adrian Wojnarowski type
right.
to even report on this stuff, like there's no way they could even try to. There's just too much.
It's cliche, but I've heard other people say it. I've even heard casuals say it. But college football right now is the wild, wild west, and it's a very wild west. And the bottom line, for a sport as popular as it is, I mean, college football is like the second or third most popular sport in America.
Yeah,
Um, it's unacceptable to conduct your off season in the middle of your postseason. It does not make any sense whatsoever. If you think
yeah,
about it, the portal opens, I believe, the day after, uh, well, at least this year, the portal opened the day of or the day after the CFP announced the semifinals. The CFP selection show occurred. And within like 3 hours, 350 players had already entered the portal. And this is during bowl season. And when people really used to care about bowl season outside of course, the bigger games, um, there was a clear delineation, a clear separation between one season and the other. And right now, It's just mixed all together.
Yeah.
Like,
And there was a clear value for a program to go out and win a bowl game. And I feel like that's being lost as well.
and look, we're going to talk about the portal down the road in more detail. We'll talk about NIL. We'll do all that stuff down the road. But this really comes down to me, I don't know exactly when it happened, but a couple of years ago, they introduced early signing day. It used to just be there was one signing day. It was in February. That's when all the guys would sign. They
Right.
would make their commitments whenever. But there was one signing day, and it was early on in February, like either right before, like the week of the Super Bowl or right after the Super Bowl. It was like mid-February ish, and it was perfect that way.
Yeah.
It didn't affect bowl season. Coaches pretty much had their classes in by the time they knew the guys that were going to sign. By the time their bowl games started, or they were in bowl practices and they were preparing for their bowl games. There was no transfer portal at the time. It was just one signing day. You recruit year round. You still are recruiting some guys up until the finish line to make sure they sign on the dotted line. But there was no other ancillary moving pieces. And so what I think, and I kind of agree with you, I was thinking about this earlier. I think they should move signing day to either late July or early August. I think it should be to where signing day occurs either
Wait,
right.
early signing day or signing day?
I think you have, say, a early signing day, late July, early August, to the point where maybe you can even make it before fall camps open for college football, or right at the start of fall camps. I mean, it really doesn't matter. These are high school kids. They're making their own decisions on their own timelines. And then it'd be nice to, like, say the portal opens right after, I don't know, say the portal opens like New Year's Day or something. And obviously the guys who are, in the playoff, the portal is the hardest part of this equation to me, because with the 12-team playoff, it's going to get even harder to figure out and separate the different elements in this. But I know signing day, I wish there was only one signing day. It would make things a lot easier and a lot clearer for kids. But I understand it, because some kids, they want to play through their senior season, and maybe evaluations change and they get more offers, and they're able to get a couple offers during the course of their senior season, and they don't want to sign on early signing day because they might get a late offer that they weren't expecting or something like that. I still think you keep the 2 signing days, but maybe you move early signing day from, say, December to sometime in August. I mean, hell, it can even be during fall camp for all I care. And then you figure out the portal later on.
Yeah, the thought that jumped into my head is maybe having a transfer week. Maybe somehow in between, conference championship Sunday, or conference championship Saturday, I mean, and the start of the playoff, I think there should be a week of just transfer portal stuff, like just where transfers can enter the portal, get out, meet with coaches, and have all of that stuff figured out. And then obviously you're not going to be able to make a transfer decision in a week, but just a time where you can enter the portal and make your visits, and then you can make your decision later on. But as long as you have a set time where people are entering the portal and doing all of their visits, then I think everything else becomes a little bit more organized. If that makes sense.
No, it makes it would make a lot of sense. And to have a clear week that's dedicated to players entering the portal that closes at a particular time and opens at a particular time would make sense. The problem is a lot of these kids, and this is why you've seen so many issues with this, a lot of these kids want to get in the portal, take their visits, and make a decision by the time the spring semester starts. That way they can get enrolled at their new school so that they not only can be in classes, but they can participate in spring ball with their new head coach, their new school, all of that stuff,
Right.
which makes sense. And it just limits the amount of time that they have to get in the portal, evaluate their options, make their visits, make a commitment, get enrolled at the school all before the spring semester starts in, say, the second or third week of January for most schools around the country. It's just a very tight timeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I
so,
think even if you have to push the season forward, like the start of the season forward, I think it would be well worth it. Because I'm looking at the calendar for the 12 team playoff. The first round of the playoff games is December 20th and December 21st. So if you could figure out a way to have transfer portal week be early December, then what you're saying can still be an option for these, for these players, so they can still make their decisions before the start of the spring semester. But it's still just, it's not going to be perfect, but
right.
I think just having a set week for it would make the most sense.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because pro sports don't have to. And I know pro sports are totally in a different stratosphere than college sports.
Yeah.
But they don't have to tackle this. The NFL, the NBA, their calendars make total sense for the most part.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah. The
NBA,
element of them still trying to get their education is what makes this difficult, because
yeah,
if if that wasn't the case, they could just have a free agency in like March or April and it wouldn't be a problem. But since, spring semester, fall semester, and them still trying to get their degrees is still a thing, and it should be a thing, like that has to be like shuffled around to meet that as well. So that makes it so much more condensed.
yeah. No, I mean it. There's no perfect linear solution to this issue, but there are ways to make it better. And as we've discussed already, and look, we're not going to go all the way into the weeds because we have all off season to talk about this as things develop. But as I was saying before, like we know in the NBA, the finals usually in early to mid June. A few days or a week too later, the draft happens, and then a couple weeks after that, free agency opens.
Yeah.
And there's a couple days there where a lot of shit happens, and the NBA grabs the headlines in the middle of summer. Trades, signings, this star going there, this star going there. Like, we know that. The NBA is great at that. And their calendar, I love it. The NFL, again, makes sense. You have an 18-week regular season. You have 3 weeks of playoffs. You have a week off between your
Conference championships and the
conference,
Super Bowl.
your semifinals, as they would be in college football, and your championship game, the Super Bowl.
Right.
Not an entire month, which makes no sense to me. And look, and then after the season, in March, free agency starts, and then late April, there's the draft, and then there's in between there's OTAs and summer workouts, and then before you know it, training camp's here. In baseball, it's a little more complicated, but there are more elements to baseball. There's, the international draft pool. There's the MLB draft, which is a lot bigger and a lot more complex than those leagues' drafts. There's free agency, which doesn't really have a real start and a real end. I mean, some of these guys aren't signing until the middle of spring training, for all we know.
Yeah.
So there are many issues with each sport. It's not to say these leagues are flawless by any means, but there's a lot of problems in college football that exist to me because, for one, there's no central leadership, and it's really now kind of two conferences are running the sport of college football, and will for the foreseeable future until something changes.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's going to be a lot of change that will happen, but there's no way to know what direction they'll decide to go in. I think to close this conversation, I think we should address probably maybe changes to how the when the national championship is played, and then also
yeah.
how scheduling is done, and possible ideas for that as well. Out of those two, what would you want to talk about first?
First, I think the easiest thing is the championship game.
Yeah.
Should be played on a Saturday. And I think we both know, and we've kind of talked about this, Joel Klatt had the best idea.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking.
He said, in layman's terms, he basically said they should take the championship game, they should have it wild card weekend, and they should have the audience from the wild card doubleheader lead straight into that Saturday NFL wildcard doubleheader. That audience leads straight into the championship game. You can take the 25, 30 million people who are watching those games and just shove them right into your game on the biggest stage in college football, the national championship. And I think it makes total sense. He also talked about leveraging the NFL in this scenario and trying to get them on board with revenue sharing and all of that, incentivizing the NFL to give you these favorable time slots. Monday night just makes no sense.
Yeah.
Like, why do we play our games on Saturday all season long, and then the most important game of the season is on a Monday night? It makes no sense at all.
Yeah, for college basketball is one thing because it's March Madness works perfectly for it
Yeah,
to be 2 days later on that Monday, but for college football, I just don't. There's no reason to even fathom why that's the case.
exactly. So I think that's the easy part. We can talk
Super
more.
simple, yeah.
You can talk more about that later. But in terms of scheduling, that's a little more complicated. What did you want? What was on your mind there?
Well, just the way it's currently set up for Power Five conference teams, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure how it is for a group of five, but for Power Five, you're basically setting up your out of conference schedule 10 years in advance. And I think that deserves to be discussed and tweaked a little bit. And it's not that it's uh a horrible idea in theory. It's just that with how fluid the landscape of the sport is right now, having that be the structure is just not practical.
Yeah,
Like we saw it with Michigan last year. Michigan was supposed to play Oklahoma, but with Oklahoma moving to the SEC, that kind of fell right on its head, and those games got canceled. So like things like that happen, and then you end up with situations where the non-conference schedules isn't good for the sport. So Josh Pate brought up the idea of like a committee deciding non-conference games. I'm not totally opposed to that, but there's a lot of different ways you can go with it. But I mostly just wanted to focus on how non-conference games are decided because I think that's where uh, there's a discussion to be had.
absolutely. That singular statement right there, non-conference scheduling. because the conference scheduling is going to take care of itself. Now
Right.
with these two semi-super conferences, excuse me, um, like we know what the structure is going to be. Uh, Now the SEC eventually might move to 9 conference games, and the Big Ten is going to do what the Big Ten does. And I love the fact that there are going to be no more divisions in those conferences. There's no more
Yeah.
SEC East, SEC West crap. We're going to get Alabama and Georgia playing in week 4. They're going to play a game in September against each other, a game that we have to wait to see until the first week of December. Most years is going to be played in early December or in late September, and boy, that's going to be something else. So we're going to get more exciting games in conference. Out of conference has always been an issue, and I agree these games should not be scheduled 10 years in advance or whatever it is, 8 years in advance. Like I know Texas, for example, has or they had originally, like they had this upcoming Michigan non-conference game scheduled for like the past 6 or 7 years. They had that Alabama home and home scheduled a long time ago. There's just no way to kind of tell what variables are going to go into that particular year, what's going to happen, uh, and so I agree with you. But we'll get more into scheduling down the road. For the sake
Yeah.
of time, I think that was a great start to the conversation. Let's move to more Texas centric conversation.
All right.
Um, so over the weekend, after the DeBoer stuff happened, he goes to Alabama. The Alabama coaching search, which lasted pretty much 48 hours. It was a hectic 48 hours at that, but they got their guy. There are a lot of reports out there about who was called, who was made the priority, who was Bama's first call, who did they really want, who turned it away, if anybody, or was DeBoer really the guy, like they've been saying. Regardless, though, uh, Jimmy Sexton, who's the premier agent in college football for a lot of these coaches, he's the agent for Mike Norvell, he's the agent for Sark, he's the agent for Kalen DeBoer. He was the agent for Nick Saban and still is. He's the guy in college football for a lot of these coaches, and he was able to kind of leverage the Nick Saban situation into big extensions for a lot of his clients. For example, Mike Norvell, I believe, got an 8-year extension with Florida State. And so that's just one example, but there were other examples as well. Sark gets a 4-year extension that will take him through 2030. So I think the conversation here is he took this Texas team from 5-7 to 8-5 a year ago to 12-1, winning the Big 12, getting to the playoff, and say what you want about that Washington game, but they were 12 yards away from potentially playing in the national championship. So
Yep.
on a confidence meter, we've done this before. How confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that Steve Sarkisian, 1, is at Texas for the remainder of this contract? And 2, how confident are you that he can sustain this success? And I'm not saying like by success, I'm not saying like, oh, he's going to go 12-1 every year and win the SEC
Mhm.
every year. That's not what I'm saying. Like being perennially in the national championship conversation, being a
Yeah.
playoff team and they extend the playoff.
I think perennially being in the conversation into November is definitely on the cards here for sure. But there is a lot of uncertainty with entering the SEC. There's no question about that. I think Texas has built the team to do it, and Sark is definitely his coaching prowess has proven like he can hang with, the Alabamas of the world, and he went into their house and beat them. So that's all the proof you really need there. But um, the consistency of being able to week after week after week uh, bring it and really, like, I guess, deal with the grueling schedule of the SEC. I think that's the part where you leave, like, question mark. It's not that I don't believe he can do it. I do believe he can do it. It's just that until he does it, that question mark will still hang there. So in terms of a confidence meter, I would say I'm hanging around like an 8.5, because there's a chance that in the SEC, with playing the LSU's of the world and Alabama's of the world and the Georgias of the world year over year over year, that can kind of corrode into, say, recruiting. Like, if you say lose your matchup to LSU, what does that mean for recruiting in those recruiting battles? Things like that. I think having those direct matchups will definitely play a part in some of those things. So I would say I'm hanging around at like an 8, because in terms of his coaching of on-field talent and his development of talent and the staff that he has put together, there's no question that they can. It's just about, when you're in these tight games, will the ball bounce in your favor, and will you be able to win those tight games consistently?
Jake Crane, who's one of my he's on one of my favorite podcasts, Crane and Company. If you haven't checked it out, you should go check it out. They're excellent and they're funny. But anywho, he always says, you don't know until you know, or something like that. Like,
Yeah, makes sense.
Texas thinks they're ready. A lot of people think they're ready. In fact, I'd say they are ready. I think they are ready for the SEC. I think Oklahoma's maybe to a little bit lesser of an extent than Texas, but I still think Oklahoma is ready for the SEC. I think they are. I think both these programs are going to go into the SEC, and as Josh Pate has said, they're not going to come in and run the conference like some people are saying, but they're also not going to come in and just get bulldozed.
Yeah.
These are two programs that are going to come in. They're going to find out to an extent, because the thing about the SEC is not that every team is singularly great, but it's a different level of talent that you're playing week in, week out, week in, week out, over and over and over again. It's different environments in the SEC. It's just a lot more that goes into it. The players are better, the talent is better, coaches are better than the Big 12. Like, that's a fact. And so it's going to be that week after week grind that's going to be, I think, it'll take some adjusting to in the SEC. And we're going to talk about that later on this offseason. But for me, I'm at like an 8.5, 9 on the first part of the question. I think the only way that Sark isn't at Texas for the remainder of this contract is if he takes an NFL job. Just kind of like Jim Harbaugh. I kind of see Sark as the guy right now at Texas for the foreseeable future. I don't see Chris Del Conte. I don't see Jay Hartzell in the Texas brass making a move on Sarkisian anytime soon. And look, if he didn't take the Alabama job, if he didn't want that job, what job is he going to want in the realm of college football other than Texas? I can make the argument that Texas is the best job in college football. You get Austin. You get the best NIL collective that there is. You get really good education, all the resources in the world, good leadership, talent acquisition resources, fantastic facilities, I mean, it just checks kind of all the boxes. You're playing now in the best conference in the country, competing against the best. Um, and Sark himself, I think, is one of those guys that while we still may have those questions about him as an on-field coach, and those are fair, he's a program builder. And I think he's proven that at Texas. He's going to continue and be one of those guys who's relentless in his approach to talent acquisition. And the thing I like about Sark is he doesn't bullshit you.
Yeah.
Um, I think he's very up front in his press conferences. He doesn't really sugarcoat a lot of things. He's moody and he kind of dances around some of those health um, questions that he gets. Like I think the Quinn stuff has kind of weighed on him for a long time, and Quinn's been hurt. But I think that's more of a program thing more so than anything. I think these programs are very protective of these kids. Don't really like to give out a whole lot as it pertains to these injuries. But no, I mean, I think he's what you need in today's version of college football is you need a guy that's going to be relentless on the recruiting trail. Like absolutely relentless. He's obsessed with recruiting. And I'd go as far as to say Sark is obsessed with recruiting. I mean, how else would he have gotten the number 3 rated class after a 5-7 season? He's absolutely obsessed with recruiting. He's on the recruiting trails every single week. He has a fine-tuned approach to attacking the portal. I think Texas really has it figured out. Like their system of talent acquisition right now is perfect. The lifeblood of the program is going to be those freshmen, developing those freshmen. But they're not going to settle for just hoping that these freshmen can go out and prove it year one in the SEC. They're going out and getting proven, ready to go guys on the box, proven on the spot, whatever you want to call it, guys that improve their roster. And every opportunity Sark has to what he thinks will improve this roster, he's going to take advantage of that. And the resources help, absolutely, but that's why he's at Texas. And so that's why I don't think he's going to leave unless he one day gets the desire to take an NFL job, which you can't totally count out. But right now, I don't see that in the foreseeable future. Why would he leave now? He's not going to, of course. So the first part of the question, I'm at like a 9. I don't think he's leaving Texas. I think most likely, barring some kind of disaster in the SEC, he's at Texas through the remainder of this contract.
Yeah, I think he has a long leash. Like it would have to take a Chris Beard type of situation to get him out like quickly. Like I don't think like even if he goes into the SEC and they have a 6 or 7 win season, do you think they would pull the trigger on, on firing him after he just brought you to the playoff the year before? Like I don't see that happening.
No. Now if they go into the SEC and say they go 7-6, and then the next year they go 7 or 8 again, like then I think the conversations would start to ramp up a little bit. But one round of struggle through the SEC isn't going to do anything, really.
Yeah.
He's earned himself.
Even in year one, Nick Saban didn't win the SEC.
Right. So it's, I mean, and on the second part of the question, I think I'm around an 8. Like, I think Texas will be perennially in contention for the 12-team playoff. And we'll see what happens. Like, it's kind of hard to say right now where they're going to end up each year, but they'll be in those conversations year in, year out. So that's 100%. Where we'll leave. That's where we'll leave that for right now. There's a lot more conversation around Sark and this coaching staff that's yet to come, but we'll leave that there for right now. But the bottom line is Texas has their guy. For the first time since Mac, Texas has their guy.
Yeah.
And nobody's saying that Sark is Mac Brown. Nobody's saying he's going to have the success that Mac Brown did. But this is their guy. Tom Herman, they thought it was maybe him. It wasn't. They thought it was maybe Charlie Strong. It wasn't.
Yeah, we knew pretty quickly with that
they
one.
got Steve Sarkisian, and hey, look, you could have said year one, this ain't gonna work. Like, how do you lose six straight games in a row? That team was just, it's like they checked out.
Yeah, that was hard to watch.
Last year, up and down season. This year, fantastic season. So it's just kind of, we'll have to wait and see, but we're in a good place with the coaching staff as a whole. Okay, so the bigger news over the weekend was the portal. Texas. So originally there was scuttlebutt that Isaiah Bond, the leading receiver in some respects at Alabama this year, was going to enter his name into the portal. He didn't. The portal closed, but then Nick Saban retired, and that changed everything. And he ended up entering his name into the portal. I believe it was like Thursday or Friday of this past week. He takes a visit to Texas Saturday, and then before even lunchtime on Sunday, it was announced that he was committing to Texas. This is a huge get for Texas. Obviously, we had talked about the wide receiver room quite a bit. We had talked about how the pickup of Matthew Golden was a nice one. Just getting a guy that's experienced and a proven commodity at the receiver position to go along with some of the young guys was a good start. We had talked about Ryan Wingo when he committed. We've talked about Jonte Cook and how we think he's going to take another step this year as he really steps into to assume a starting role. We know how much talent, but unproven talent Texas had in this receiving room. But we knew they had a lot to replace. And that's obvious. A.D. Mitchell leaves. Xavier Worthy leaves. J.T. Sanders leaves. Let's leave out J.T. Sanders because that's more so a tight end conversation. But Jordan Whittington's out. So Isaiah Nayer's gone, even though he didn't really have much of a role at Texas. They go out and they find a way once again. Sark finds a way once again to get his guy in the portal. This had a very similar feeling to the A.D. Mitchell situation last year.
Yeah.
Not in that A.D. Mitchell and Isaiah Bond are like identical players or anything like that. They're totally different. But it kind of just felt like, okay, Isaiah Bond's entering the portal. He's going to take a visit to Texas. He knows where he's going. Like it just feels like a match made in heaven from the start. So your thoughts on Isaiah Bond as a player and his fit with Texas? How big is this for the Longhorns?
Well, I mean, it's huge. I mean, we saw Alabama's vertical passing game last year and how good it was. Like that was the bread and butter of their offense. And I know they didn't really use that. They didn't really show that against Michigan, but I mean, that's Michigan. Every other team they played, it was that vertical passing game, and it was Isaiah Bond. Like he has legitimate speed, and he showed in that Auburn game too. He's clutch as well. If you get him in a one-on-one jump ball situation, he's going to go get it. I mean, it's huge. It's massive. I mean, I don't know what the exact plan Sark will have for him, like in terms of, moving him around outside of the slot. But I know that him coming in to Texas, the goal will be to get him to maybe 1,500 yards at least. Like I think that is on the cards here, and he has all the talent in the world to be able to do that.
This is a huge get for Texas. I think it's the biggest get so far in the portal for them.
Oh yeah,
Let's just start with the obvious. Isaiah Bond last year, this past year, led Alabama in receptions with 48. He was second on their team in receiving yards with almost 700, and he was second in touchdowns with 4. As a player, he's, I think, a prototypical Steve Sarkisian wide receiver. Um, you see the playmaking ability on tape. You see the versatility, which I'll get to in a second. And you see his speed, which you touched on. He challenges defenses vertically, but he's also excellent after the catch. He can make stuff happen after the catch. This was a guy that won state titles in high school in Buford, Georgia, in track in the 100 and 200 meter as a junior in high school. He is, I don't know if he's Xavier Worthy fast, but he's fast. He is fast. And I think with the versatility aspect, Sark can move this guy around. He's not going to have to play one position, like outside or inside in this Texas offense. I think Sark this year is maybe kind of adjusting a little bit to having a more diversified approach with his wide receivers based on the acquisitions that he's made in the portal. Before it was kind of like, okay, we know Xavier Worthy's going to be outside. We know A.D. Mitchell's going to be outside, and we know Whittington's going to be in the slot. And there was really no variation there.
Yeah, and there wasn't a substitution as well.
Right. There's been no rotation. The guys that Sark wants to play are going to play.
Right.
And that's not really an issue. Although I do think they need to try to get some of these younger guys on the field a little bit more. The guys that are proven and that prove themselves in practice are going to play.
Right.
And I think Isaiah Bond is a guy that his playing time and his play splits at Alabama prove my point that I'm making. He was a guy that played this past year 58.6% of his snaps in the slot. So round that up to say 59%. He played 59% of his snaps in the slot, and he played 41% of his snaps outside. So it's 59% in the slot, 41% outside. He's comfortable in both positions, and it gives them that versatility. They could put Matthew Golden in the slot as well if they wanted to and move Bond outside. We just don't really know how Sark is quite going to approach this yet. I think you're going to see Jonte Cook as the primary slot guy, but that's not to say that they're not going to move Isaiah Bond to the slot some. They're not going to move Matthew Golden into the slot some. Hell, they might even mix in Ryan Wingo here as well. He has excellent hands. One of the big issues with Xavier Worthy a lot of the time was that he struggled sometimes with drops, and Isaiah Bond doesn't have that issue. 2 drops in 14 games at Alabama this past year, one of the lowest drop rates amongst major wide receivers in college football. I like everything about this kid. He's good in the classroom from what I've read. He's gonna
based on what he said in the media, like saying like how this is a business decision. Like you can tell he's an intelligent dude and he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, and I don't know if everyone saw what he said about Quinn too. I think Quinn returning. Like I don't think this was a coincidence. Like you see Quinn announce that he's coming back, then you see Sark get the extension, and then they get Isaiah Bond. Like it all kind of happened in a span of a couple days. And look, I can't tell you that they knew that Saban was going to retire, but you also can't say they didn't maybe knows something was coming. These guys are well connected. Sark is very well connected to Nick Saban in that Alabama program. So we don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but the bottom line here is I really like Matthew Golden. I think he's going to play a major role in this Texas offense. I think Jonte Cook, people are sleeping on him a little bit.
Yeah.
I think he's going to take a major step in the right direction. But I think Isaiah Bond immediately comes in, and you're going to see him as kind of the wide receiver one in this offense because he can do a little bit of everything. And I think there's a chance that if Quinn takes that next step to being first round quarterback in next year's draft, and say he's in the Heisman conversation, like a lot of early projections say he's going to be putting up big numbers, Isaiah Bond's going to have a big part in that. And I think there's a chance that Isaiah Bond next year performs to an all SEC kind of level in this Texas offense. Look, playing with Jalen Milroe is awesome. There was an excellent deep ball, but there were times this year where I could see some frustration in that Alabama offense with those receivers, with some
100%.
throws
Yeah, I mean,
that weren't
just
being
from a volume standpoint, he was completing about 15 passes per game. And just from a volume standpoint, that's going to be way up in the Texas offense.
Yeah, and I think Quinn is a better passer from the pocket than Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to work out very, very well. Could it work out to the extent of what A.D. Mitchell did? I mean, if it does, great. I think it'll be somewhere around that. I don't know if Bond will, whether it's yards, touchdowns, or receptions, I can't tell you. I mean, A.D. Mitchell is really a guy that came in, scored 10 touchdowns, but really didn't have the yards that, say, a Xavier Worthy did. So, I mean, there are different types of receivers, different prototypes of receivers, and I can't tell you what connection is going to click right away. For Quinn, it was A.D. Mitchell. There's no real telling of that. The good thing for Texas is, and we'll talk about the offense more as a whole down the road sometime in the near future when Texas finishes its portal shopping, if you will, because I still think they're going to get a tight end in the portal. I think they like Gunnar Helm, but they need another guy.
Just for 2 tight end stuff.
Yep. And I think that's probably about it on the offensive side. They're looking at before we move on, let's talk about bigger picture portal stuff. I think they're definitely looking to add a linebacker for depth. Kendrick Blackshire is a name to keep your eye on. He's a linebacker out of Duncanville that played but didn't start at Alabama the past couple of years. And he'd be kind of a depth rotational piece at that inside linebacker spot. More of a downhill run thumper, more so than anything. Not necessarily the most flashy of linebackers that could potentially be out in the market in the portal, but he would definitely raise the floor of that linebacker room, and that I think be a solid get for Texas going into the SEC. He's a guy that's played in the SEC. He's a guy that knows a lot of these offenses that he's played against in the SEC, and I think every year I think Sark is going to try to look at that Bama roster and try to pick a couple guys that he wants from that Bama roster.
Yeah. This is going to be Alabama West in a few years.
I think Texas is still looking for another defensive back, and Jabbar Muhammad is in the portal.
Ooh.
And he's going to take a visit to Texas on Wednesday.
That could be huge. That could be so huge.
As I understand it, from what I read, from credible sources in the industry, it's an Oregon-Texas battle there. Both right when Jabbar Muhammad made the decision to enter the portal, both Steve Sarkisian and Dan Lanning went to Dallas this past weekend to take an in-home visit with Jabbar Muhammad. So they were in home and they were making their initial pitch. I'm told both meetings went well, both programs. Muhammad likes both programs, but there's a sense that now that Texas, I'm not sure if Oregon's going to get an official visit. I've yet to hear that. Maybe they are. I haven't heard that yet. But from a Texas perspective, they're going to get him on campus. And there's a couple things going for them. Number one, he's got not only one, but two cousins that are on the Texas football team. He's got his fellow cousin Malik Muhammad, the freshman cornerback from this past year, and Billy Walton, a young defensive lineman from the 23 recruiting class on this roster. And he's got another cousin that's currently on the women's Texas basketball team. He's got three cousins at Texas. Three.
That's great.
He also loves Sark. And I think, look, that would be a huge get. I think right now it's really hard to tell. It's still early on, but I think he's another guy that wants to maybe get on campus for spring ball. So I'd watch that situation pretty closely. I'd watch the Kendrick Blackshire situation pretty closely. That's coming down to Ole Miss or Texas. The Muhammad stuff is probably coming down to Oregon and Texas as the front runners, but Alabama could sneak into that conversation as well with his old coach going to Alabama. We'll see where that goes. And then there's one more name, Silas Bolden, a receiver from Oregon State that visited Texas over the weekend, and he's, I think, leaning Texas. There's a lot of question, though, as to how he would be used because now all of a sudden the Texas
this room is pretty crowded now.
The room is pretty crowded now, exactly. And look, Bolden's a really solid player. He's smaller, but he's speedy. I think Sark would have an excellent time figuring out how to use that guy. A lot of people have been saying he kind of be the new Keelan Robinson, a guy that you can move around kind of as a gadget guy. And using kick return and special teams as well. The thing is about that is if Silas Bolden if he really wants to be a receiver, I don't know what Silas Bolden wants, but if he's coming to Texas to be like a receiver, a starting receiver, I don't know if that's the best move, but
yeah, and personally, I really liked Keelan Robinson as well. Like I thought, there was probably some more opportunities to get him the ball more, and every time he touched the ball, he was electric.
But
so I think in that role you could be pretty productive, but it's just Sark doesn't really go to that option that often.
As I understand it, though, if Bolden wants to come, he's not going to get turned away. So they must have a plan for him. Maybe we will see more receiver rotation this year. Who knows? But with all that being said, we're at the hour mark, so let's just go ahead and wrap this thing up by talking about Cam Ward, who made his commitment to Miami over the weekend. Miami's made a couple other ancillary additions, minor additions in the portal, depth pieces mainly. But the big one came, I think, Saturday or Sunday when they got Cam Ward out of the portal. Cam Ward being the quarterback formerly of Washington State, and before that, started his career at Incarnate Word of FCS.
Yeah.
Back in
Shout out to Reese Watson.
back in 2020, and look, in his second year at Incarnate Word, he was an FCS second team All American, and he won the Southland Conference Player of the Year. In that season, he completed 65% of his passes through 47 touchdowns, 10 picks back in 2021. Had a very good 2022, but this past year, he finished fourth nationally in passing yards. He completed 67% of his pass attempts, 25 touchdowns, seven interceptions, through the air, and he added 8 rushing touchdowns this past year. He's a massive acquisition for Miami, a program that I think is trending in the right direction, a program that needs to get back on the map from a national contention standpoint. I think that
Just for the sake of the ACC as well.
for the sake of the ACC, but also it'd be great for college football. He's a proven talent. One of my favorite quarterbacks in college football. And I think this is what I'll say. Mario Cristobal, there's been a lot of questions about Mario Cristobal and the start to his Miami tenure. But I think if there's one thing we know about Mario Cristobal going back to his days at Oregon, is that he's going to be relentless in the way that he builds the roster. He's one of those guys, kind of like Sark in a way, that's going to be great at acquiring talent, both on the recruiting trail and through the transfer portal. This is his biggest get yet, and it comes at the most important position. And after a lot of inconsistency at the quarterback position through his first 2 years at Miami with Tyler Van Dyke, who's a very serviceable college quarterback, Cam Ward is a guy that's going to give you that consistency. You know what you're getting. You're getting a guarantee on the box at the quarterback spot. And you can
dual threat.
Yep. You can kind of start to piece this thing together a little bit. Like, I'm not saying that Miami's going to be the team to make the Texas jump from 7-5 or 8-4, whatever they were this past year, to 12-0, make the playoff in the expanded era. They could. Maybe that happens, but I'm not saying that. But I do think it's quite possible with just the addition of Cam Ward that they could go from, and some of the guys that they've recruited on the lines of scrimmage, some of the athletes that they've recruited, and with some of their returning talent, they could go from 7-5 to 9-3, something along those lines. I mean, Florida State lost a lot.
Yeah. If they have some quality wins, you have a shot with 3 losses.
There's a lot of uncertainty around Clemson right now. There's really no, at this moment in time, no outright favorite in the ACC right now.
Yeah, no powerhouse.
But someone in the new structure from that conference is getting in the playoff, because now we're going to have a system that awards the conference championship winners, I think, a spot in the playoff. So if you're Miami, I mean, you maybe have as good an opportunity as anybody does right now, given that, as far as I can think, you probably have the best quarterback in the ACC. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, if you get in, who knows what could happen?
I mean,
as well, like they have a good amount of 5 stars on their roster. Like, this is not a team that's barren of talent either.
Right. Jordan Travis is out. Drake May is out. Riley Leonard, the quarterback at Duke, he's gone. So I think it's a huge get. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, I mean, you said everything I would have said, but I mean, I just think Cam Ward, if nothing else, just I think you're guaranteed to kind of stabilize in terms of just having a leader of your team. Like just a guy that, is going to be there early, leave late, and just lead the team in the right direction. Like set the winning culture. Because Mario Cristobal can say whatever he wants, but it comes down to the players to set the culture and do what they got to do. And that comes down to usually the upperclassmen and usually the quarterback. So that's what I'll add to that. I think it's a great get in a lot of different ways, but I think just in terms of leadership, that could be the biggest thing because Miami's been so inconsistent for so long. Like they've had years where they've been pretty decent, but
Yeah.
they've just never been able to win the big ones.
Yeah, I think what you said about players being the drivers of the culture is spot on because I think Texas this past year is prime example.
Yeah.
The players were the leaders of that team.
Yeah, I mean, you saw the QBs getting in the gym. I mean, there was a team atmosphere there, 100%.
Absolutely. And culture is I don't want to say. I mean, it matters for sure. It's probably at points in times an overused word in
Yeah,
college
yeah,
football, but it matters. And 2 years ago, Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, Texas didn't have that. They didn't
no,
have the culture, and now they do. And when you combine culture with talent, with resources, I mean, it's dangerous. And Texas can do that. Miami can do that. All these bigger programs have, to different extents, the ability to do it. And as Josh Pate says, it's not that they can't do it. It's just that they haven't done it yet. And maybe that's the case with Mario Cristobal in Miami. I hope so for the good of college football. Because I don't, as much as I kind of like the idea of the big dogs running college football, the Big Ten and the SEC, USC, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan. As much as I kind of like that, I still want, and I know the Pac-12 is gone now, unfortunately, but I still
yeah,
want the ACC and the Big 12 to be solid.
yeah.
And I think the Big 12 will be, but the ACC has more questions. So we'll see. But with all that being said, any parting shots before we close out episode 43 of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports?
No party shots really. Shout out to the Eagles. Thanks for losing. Appreciate it. And that's kind of it, man. The NFC East went out with a whimper. They were considered before the season as one of the best divisions in football, and then, well, not really.
Yeah. It's I'm excited to talk about these divisional games. I've started
Yeah, yeah,
thinking about them, and there's already so much that I'm gonna have to say on that episode. Hopefully,
yeah. Bucks Lions is intriguing for sure.
hopefully my predictions go a little bit better than they did this past week.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I would say the same for myself.
it's never
Good God.
never never great in these days of predicting games, but
3-6 or something each, something like that. Oh gosh.
yeah, I don't think I hit either of my best bets. Did Kelsey go? How many receiving yards did Kelsey get? Do you know? Off the top of your head?
It would probably be pretty close to 57. I'm not entirely sure.
All right. Well,
He had a few big catches, but
we'll
I don't even remember what my best bet was. I think it was strangely enough, I think it was Packers to cover the spread. That's my best bet.
well,
And
you probably hit at least one. I may have hit the Kelsey one. I'm not sure. I could have hit the Rams won. I had Rams money line as
Yeah, I'll go back and watch that episode just so we can keep track of the points and the overall record.
but
And we can kind of
I'm trying to go
we can have like a little competition throughout the playoffs.
yeah, I'm trying to go through it in my head because I know I picked the Browns. Oh well.
Me too.
The Joe Flacco magic ran out.
Yeah.
The credit to Houston. Who do we pick? I think we both picked Kansas City, so we got that right. Let's see. We both picked Buffalo. We got that right. I believe we both picked the Rams. We were close there. We had logical thinking there, but we were wrong.
Yeah.
And congratulations to the Lions. I think we still both picked the Eagles, I believe. So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
wrong there.
I sort of talked myself into picking the Eagles last minute because I wanted to pick the Bucks but I couldn't do that after, watching them the last few weeks. They kind of it was a little weird the last couple weeks for the Bucks because they lost to the Saints and then only put up 9 points against Carolina. But I mean,
Yeah. And then we both picked the Cowboys, but you were more right than me in that not only did you say the Packers would cover, but you also, I believe, placed a bet on that.
yeah, I did.
Um,
I on the Monday after the final week of the season put in $10 on the Chiefs covering 3.5 point spread and the Packers covering 7.5, and I won some good money for it, so it turned out okay.
that's smart. You got some financial gain out of a not so great situation. I
Yeah,
wish
but it still doesn't. It still doesn't heal the hole in my heart.
yeah. No, I get it. All right.
Man.
Well, we got to get out of here because it's 11:45. We might have to reconsider.
Yeah, we might have to move the NBA episode. Keep an eye out for it.
Yeah.
But I think in the next few days, divisional round and NBA episode, keep an eye out for it. We'll be live doing that. But I think this will be it for the night for us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll likely be back later this week or this weekend with another dit hole. There's a lot going on, but just keep your eye out for good content on the Raw Prospect Podcast YouTube channel. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hook 'em horns. I wouldn't be surprised if before next time we talk on this episode or this podcast that the Longhorns have a couple more portal commitments. And we'll be choosing our next program that we want to cover. And also, I wanted to mention this, just keep it on y'all's radar. I got to talk to Emmy about it, but going to start getting into a little bit, just slowly venturing into the world of college baseball here pretty soon.
Yeah, I knew you would say that. I'm ready for it.
He knew it. I know he knew it. But for those of you watching, you may not have known it. So I'm going to try to figure out exactly what that looks like. I want to, since it's kind of new to both of us, we're going to have to figure out some more innovative ways to talk about it. We'll start on the Texas side of things, and then we'll kind of slowly venture our way out. It'll be a lot easier. I think this side of this small section of Dit Hole will be a lot easier once Texas is in the SEC officially, because then all we really need to talk about mainly is SEC baseball, because that's where a lot of the power programs are. But this year we'll figure it out. But for now, be safe out there, especially if you're in one of these cities where hell is basically frozen over and the ice, I can't even talk anymore. There's ice on the roads. There's closures and delays, I believe, in a lot of the school districts, not only in Austin, but here in Houston already. So be safe out there. and we'll see you tomorrow night for NFL divisional round preview. Peace out, Hook'em.
Peace out.